we have to respect our own abilities. We need to respect the resources we have, who we are, where we are. It's useless to say, oh, if I had, if I could, if I did, if I knew, if this, that, or the other. If I were a Buddha, I would have done differently. Me too. But the point is, I'm not. The point is, I have my own limits. Let's say it. Who here has not done something stupid? Who among us has not been taken, by jealousy or anger or fear? I mean, many of us have done things that we realized after weren't the best, or maybe even at the time we knew they weren't the best. Sometimes people would say, like, I was better when I was worst. I mean, now that I know, not only do I now, I get angry, but I know I shouldn't get angry, and so I get angry that I got angry. But here, there's a very important point. There are two points. One, like we just said, we need to respect the length of our own legs, and be kind to ourselves. This is very clearly explained in teachings. We talk about Shi, Lam, and Trebu, which is Shi, Lam, Tre, Sum. The three is the basis, the path, and the result. This gets applied to so many aspects to our lives. Even you could even apply it to a business model. We start with the basis, the foundation. So we recognize clearly what the resources available are. So first I need to understand what we have. What are the resources we have? This is knowing the basis. Once I have clarity about the resources available, then I jump and I look at the result. Okay, we analyze the basis. We analyze basis, result, and path. So with the resources that I have, what can I do? So we analyze basis, result, path, but then we actually do basis, path, result. So for example, if I wanted to make a statue, how big is my statue? So, if the piece of stone is only 3 meters high, I can't make a sculpture that's 20 meters tall. I need to adjust according to the resources that are available. I mean, there's also those who are able to do a lot with the resources they have. There's a stupa, for example, it's called Bodha in Kathmandu, and it's really emblematic of the city of Kathmandu. It's the stupa with the painted eyes. It's very big. This stupa was constructed by a woman many years ago, and she went to the king and asked him for some ground, some land where she could build a stupa. And he saw her and he didn't have a lot of trust in her. So she chose a piece of land that was really quite far from anything. And he said, I'll give you land as big as you're able to cover with the leather of a cow, with the skin of a cow. So with that, one would make a very small stupa. And she said, okay, thank you. She took the piece of leather that was given to her for the koi, and she started with scissors from the small corner, and she started cutting, and she went around and around, and she made basically a long string, and then she made a huge circle with the string, and she then called the king and said, "This is the area of land I want." And then the king said, "Okay, you got me, your ape. You know, you saw a potential in that piece of leather that I didn't see." So this reminds us that once we see resources, it depends also on our ability to see the potential in that resource, how we can use it in the best way possible. But first we recognize the resources that are present. What can we do with them? Once I've imagined what I can do with the resources that I have, and I can idealize the result, then I start to practice the path. How can I use those resources along the path? I have a piece of stone and I imagine what kind of statue I can make. Once I've imagined it, then I need to start sculpting and do all the work that one needs to do to make a sculpture. But I can never get to a result if I don't have the awareness or respect for the resources available. If we set objectives that are not consistent with the resources that are available, then we'll spend our time complaining that we're not able and it's not possible because we're not respecting the reality in which we find ourselves. So along for our spiritual path, we in our everyday life too, we need to do the same thing. What do we have? Who are we? There are two aspects to look at when we talk about knowing the basis and looking at our resources. One is knowing our body and our mind, our being, which is an important part of the resources we have. And then there's another part of reflections and studies. It's a little bit more complex, which means like studying the relative and absolute reality that also is part of the available resources. Let's try to look at these two themes, subjects briefly. Are we selfish or are we altruistic? And if you basically, our priority is the I and the my or the common good. Let's be sincere. It's the I and the my. Okay. If I feel good, okay, then sure it's good. Others are well too. But do we have mental defilements, anger, jealousy? Maybe one more than the other, but we do have our own mental defilements. The reality around us, does it appear as if it were objective, even if we know it's not like that? I mean, we have our own ignorance. We're afraid of suffering. We are attached to mundane things, aren't we? If we went to look, I mean, we're not, in many aspects, we're not so well off. It's, but it's not, it's not an obstacle. We just need to understand our starting point. We're selfish, we have jealousy and envy and anger, and do we also have feelings like love and generosity, patience, joy? We do. We have them. We're not just one thing. There are many aspects that make us up. But the fundamental point above anything, first and foremost. Are we selfish in an objective way, or are we selfish within our interaction? Are we selfish in an interdependent way or in an intrinsic way? Let me explain myself better. Our mental defilements like anger and jealousy and envy and selfishness itself, they don't come from nothing. They're part of very complex processes. These processes make it so that one thought brings to another action, and they're just habits. And habits that we've created, but being part of our resources, even our mind is also interdependent. Our mind has this ability to get used to something, to transform itself. If I have a certain type of experience, little by little, I get used to that type of experience. So one of the strongest resources that we have, most powerful that we have, the basis on which it makes everything else possible, is the interdependence of our being. It means that our being transforms itself according to how it interacts. Our mind, our body, our being transforms itself depending on how it interacts. So if I interact in one certain way, I'm going to transform in that way. If I interact in another way, then that's the way I'll transform. It's true that we have all these things, but at the same time, we have this ability to see and to desire and to imagine, which is very important ability that we have. And so this ability to imagine, to dream, we can aspire to something that today doesn't exist, but is possible, like a stable peace, inner peace. And here we also have the ability for our mind to adapt as we interact in a certain way or another. So within these resources, there's the fact that we have also love and compassion and generosity, stability. We have our own qualities. It's a question of, which quality are we going to cultivate more? Which characteristics are we going to cultivate more? So we have these resources are there to do terrible things, but also to do wonderful things. We have resources that if they're used badly, then we could enter into a frightening state of suffering. If we enter into a vicious cycle of anger and hate and paranoia and suffering, we could get into a total vortex of deep suffering. Instead, if we enter into a virtuous cycle of love and awareness and generosity, we'll be able to more and more generate virtuous minds. So they can go either way. But what's really important, we need to start from a state where we welcome ourselves without imposing onto ourselves what we should be, should have been, but aren't. Because there's a danger when we start to practice Buddhism, and now we're going to talk about how bad selfishness is to us, and how egotistically speaking it's better to be altruistic. And then someone might think, oh, look how bad I am, I'm so selfish, I shouldn't be so selfish. So there's a kind of self-punishment, a kind of self-blame and self-criticism. Instead, we need the opposite, not in the sense, it's not to say, how wonderful it is that I'm selfish, but to say we need to welcome ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves, like hug ourselves, and start with an attitude, start with a deep and sincere feeling of affection towards ourselves. Let's remember that we want to be well, that to say, I love myself, I want to be happy, and on this basis, have I ever done something stupid? Sure, of course, me and everyone else. But the point isn't doing something I shouldn't have done then, and then if at that time, if I had done things differently, things would have gone differently. I'm the result of all the causes and conditions and the interactions, that have come till now. But the point is, I love myself. What is it that I want to be? What can I do? I need to be kind to myself, and direct myself towards what I want to become. So when we say that we're selfish, at the basis of selfishness, there's a very, very strong feeling, which is sometimes translated as desire, and this aversion towards craving. It's translated as craving, this aversion to suffering and desire for happiness. So we want to be happy, and at the same time we don't want to suffer at all, and that's fine. But when we start, thanks to those who open our eyes and show us a different perspective, and they show us, what is it? What does it mean to be happy, to be well? And it's not just creating external favorable conditions. It's not being in a place where people are in a certain way. It's an inner state of peace. It's a state of satisfaction and balance and love and joy. This is what I want. So in front of this is, I say, I want to reach that. This is where we need to direct our selfishness. I want to be well, yes. And at a certain point, when we start to see that I really want to be well, then we realize, we recognize this process, that what keeps us from being happy, among other things, is our obsession with the I and the my. We shouldn't oppose ourselves or go against ourselves. We shouldn't go against our happiness and sacrifice for the benefit of others. No, we should understand gradually that the more obsessed I am by my own happiness, the worse off I will be, and the worse off I will be with others and with myself. Because at the end of the day, what makes us happy is the harmony with others. It's the giving, it's receiving. It's not the state of closing myself up in a kind of a golden palace, 4 walls, and where I close myself up in a kind of a building where there's everything I want, and I fulfill all my desires, and I don't care about others. We wouldn't be happy there. No, we're made to share, to be together with others. And the joy that we feel when we're able to open up our hearts and love others is a joy that goes far beyond any kind of joy that one could feel himself alone. If you look, our anger, our jealousy, our envy, our attachment, our fear, any other aspect of this kind through which we experience suffering, it comes from what? From this kind of obsession obsession with our self-gratification. So, I don't know what words to use, but there's a process where one gets to the point where we feel that this obsession with the self-gratification is really harmful. It hurts us. And when we're able really to recognize how much we are trapped by this, by our own obsession, at that point, a necessity, more than a desire, but it's deeper than a desire. It's a necessity to no longer be trapped. Because I want to be happy, I want to be well. We can't change selfishness without being selfish. I don't know if that's clear. Let me explain myself better. If I'm selfish, how can I not be selfish anymore? By understanding that egotistically speaking, it's better to be altruistic. So I allow selfishness to take me to being altruistic, remembering that altruism is not something opposed. It's not a direct opposite of selfishness. It's an extension of selfishness. This is my own understanding. I never read this. It's my own understanding. That because what is selfishness? I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. The I and the my. Altruism, what is it? It's the same attraction towards happiness and aversion to suffering, but directed towards others. So what's the difference? In selfishness, this attraction and aversion has to do only with myself. I don't want to suffer and I want to be happy. In altruism instead, I don't want to suffer, I want to be happy, but your happiness is as important as my own. I allow myself to extend, to enlarge my selfishness. So instead of keeping this energy, this strength directed only towards myself, I allow myself to extend it also towards others. To get to the point where I could look at someone and sincerely say and feel your happiness as is important to me as my own. Your suffering is as important to me as my own. So that same attitude that we have towards the I and the my, we extend it towards others. Now, among the people that I've known up to today, and I've met many, the most joyous, the most stable and peaceful that I've met, the ones who are the happiest, the ones that I've met and that I know have been and are people who have more consideration for others, people who are less fixated with the I and the my. On the other hand, I know many people who have marvelous external conditions, wealth and family, but being strongly obsessed with the I and the my, they constantly live in a state of suffering. So even if we just took examples, those who have a more altruistic attitude are happier. Those who live in a context where they need to take care of themselves more than anyone else are worse off. This is what I've seen. I invite you all to do your own research in this way. one of the most joyous people that I've ever met was Mother Teresa. I mean, in our collective um, idea, she's just the embodiment of charity and love. I remember in 1995, I was together with Lama Ganchen to meet her in Calcutta. There she was small and old and um, all bent over, and she had many health problems. I mean, she physically wasn't well, but and it was really just before she died. But she was so filled with joy and strength, unlike um, anyone. Very few people I've met her like her. She had great strength. All of this takes us to a question. So with what I am, this body, this mind, these resources that I have, do I want to continue cultivating this obsession with the I and the my, looking constantly to avoid suffering, in the sense of trying constantly to obtain objects of desire and avoid objects of aversion, and and um, and keep my objects of attachment, which is what we do in our life, isn't it? Or do I want to follow the dynamics of selfishness, where the whole world is divided into 9 categories, and it's 3 times 3. This attitude of selfishness, when you live it through selfishness, it divides situations and people and objects into 6 categories. The first 3 are those who are good to me are my friends. Those who hurt me are my enemies. And those who do neither good nor bad to me, I'm indifferent to them. So, but beyond the idea of friend or enemy. Let's just say we're walking down the street and we see a beautiful person. We see a beautiful person, an ugly person, and then one we don't even notice. Do we divide them? It doesn't. What did that person do to you? Nothing. Why do you have aversion to that person? Because he's dressed like this. Because his face is like this. Because that person's like that. He's got this or that. Because it doesn't match what I think he should be or she should be. Doesn't correspond. This comes from how selfishness works, constantly dividing into categories, and then the friend of our friend is our friend. So the one who's good to me is my friend. Who's good to my enemy is my enemy. The one who's bad to my enemy is my friend. It's a very sad reality. Very often we have more attraction to who does more hurt to our enemy than who does something positive to our friend. I mean, having a common enemy is something that can link people very strongly. So we have who's good to me is my friend. Who's good to my friends is my friends. Who does badly to my friends are my enemies. Who does bad, does harm to me is my enemy. Who does harm to my who does harm to my friend is my enemy, and who does good to my enemies. And then there's the categories of indifference, and it's not just for people, but it's also objects and situations. So through selfishness, we divide the world up into these categories, and then independently of whether it's enemy, friend, or neutral, we have 3 ways of relating to others through selfishness. if he who has more than I, who gets more attention, is more beautiful, is wealthier, someone who has something more than what I have, something that I think is good. So I have an attitude of jealousy, of envy, towards he who's the same as me, is as handsome or beautiful as me, who receives the same amount of attention as me. Then we have an attitude of competition. So we need to become better than the other. And towards those who have less than we have, is less money, is less intelligent, etc., we have an attitude of arrogance. We're never relaxed. It's tiring. Well, if we think about it, it's really tiring. So we're always either on the defensive or on the attack. Because we're constantly, that I have a friend and I have attraction, and I see enemy and I have aversion. These games of attraction and aversion, I need to show that I have more. I've got to be better. I need to keep my position of superiority. It's just a game that never ends. So this attitude, living in this is very tiresome, to live with these attitudes of selfishness. If you look at yourself, I mean, how attached do you think you are to your own image? If someone comes to you and says something like, or says something that we don't think corresponds to who we are, or that says something that maybe matches or corresponds, but we don't like it. For example, you're a liar because you're this or you're that. They say something that we think is negative, or that we don't want to hear. Do we suffer or not? It's just sounds. Why do we suffer? Because it's not true. I'm not like that. Well, it's not because someone said something that you become that. If you're not like that, then that's the end of the story. Instead, we suffer. We suffer because we're attached to our image and how we think people should see us. And we don't worry so much as to whether maybe the other is not well and is trying to, hurt us. We're preoccupied with how it makes us feel. What happens is that this attitude that comes from this attitude of self-gratification just is constantly using up our energy, and we often live in a kind of loop of attraction and aversion and competition, etc. That's exhausting. So just going back to the question, do I want to live? Do I want to reinforce and cultivate this attitude of selfishness, or do I want to generate an attitude, an altruistic attitude? Do I want to live in a state where the happiness of others is as important as my own, where I can think about the common good and not just my own individual good? Okay, where I can be in harmony with others independently of the situation in which I find myself. What is it that I want? Because if what I want is to be in harmony, if what I want is to open up my heart, really, which is something absolutely marvelous, we need to get to work. If we think, oh, okay, the more selfish I am, the better off I am. Please, everyone is free to choose, but we're not free from our own actions, though. So let's choose. Let's choose the direction we want to go. If we think instead that, yes, I think it's important to open up my heart. I think it's important to really not just learn, because learn seems like a conceptual process, but but to really to realize a deep state of love towards others and live in coherence with this love, with love and compassion for others. I want you to be happy. I don't want you to suffer. If this is important for us, then at this point, it makes sense to start reading the 8 verses of mind train, because without that, then these verses don't have a lot of meaning. Because if we think that taking care of the I and the my is more important, then we would read the 8 verses of mind training and think it's crazy. But let's start from this very, very important foundation. Lama Genshin sometimes would say, we like beautiful things, but the most beautiful of all beauties is a peaceful, loving, joyous mind. This is real beauty. And often he would make the example saying, we want to be loved and desired by others, don't we? We like to be respected, to be loved by others, don't we? We like when people say, oh, look how wonderful, we do. But what happens when, and how much energy do we do we put into our physical aspect towards others? Some more, some left, but let's say it's an important aspect of our society. What happens when we meet someone who physically is beautiful, but with a very difficult personality? We say, she's beautiful, in as a postcard. From far, she's wonderful. Instead, I don't know if it's ever happened to be with someone who was marvelous inside, joyous, a beautiful energy, beautiful personality, but aesthetically, just physically unattractive, ugly. It's actually a very attractive person. Even if we look at how we want to be desired by others, what's important is how we are inside, not outside. Because to be with other people, the most important thing is, even for others, is how we are, how we interact, and not how we are externally. So at least it's said that the energy you put into your into your physical aspect, you should at least put that same amount of energy into your inner self. Rinpoche would say, fine in the morning that you put on your makeup, but don't forget your inner makeup. Because if one puts on makeup and makes herself really beautiful, or but with one instant of anger ruins everything and becomes very ugly. So the people who have this deep state of love are not just better off with themselves, but they're also able to transmit this naturally to others. And of all the feelings that we have of our own characteristics, or the most the worthiest of them is this feeling of love, is wanting the happiness of others, being able to see others. So along the path that Buddha taught, there are 2 main qualities that we should train in. Love and compassion, which are 2 manifestations of the same on one side, and then on the other side, wisdom, this correct view of reality. Just so a little bit of A little bit of wisdom can generate a lot of frustration, but we're going to talk about this later. But these are the two wings that are necessary to fly. So when we talk about mind training, we're training, or we're using our life, every situation, as a tool to train in love and compassion and wisdom. And one of the marvelous qualities of mind training is that there are no excuses for not practicing, because there are there there aren't perfect conditions for Lojong. All situations are good for Lojong. You know, things don't go the way you want. It's wonderful for training, mind training. Things just are going terribly. It's perfect for your practice. So it's not that we should wait some kind of condition. Any condition is a favorable condition, and this really helps a lot, because some practices, like single-pointed concentration and meditation, to succeed in that, I mean, you can't just practice anywhere, especially at the beginning. You need certain conditions, favorable conditions. Instead, for mind training, it doesn't matter if you're at work or in your family, regardless of the context. They're all favorable for the practice. So let's start looking. Let's start from the first verse. Dani semchentam shella, insignor bule lakpe, donchun trupes asapai. Dani semchentam shella, insignor bule lakpe, donchun trupes sapais, tak tu che parazim parsho. Let's look at the translation. I'm just going to read the translation and then we'll correct it a little bit. May I always cherish all limited beings by considering how far superior they are to wish-granting gems for actualizing the supreme aim. Let's look at it again. First of all, let's try to understand, what is a wish-granting gem? This means something that satisfies any mundane desire. Today it would be, what would be a wish-granting gem today? A bank account with a couple billion. Would that be enough? I don't know. If there's somebody who wants more, we increase it, no problem. 5, 10 billion euros, that should start to be enough. And then obviously hunger comes by eating, and then as you go ahead, maybe you need the airplane and the ship, and then you need more, and then we can increase by a couple billion. But what happens, I mean, this is the wish granting gem. Yishin. Yi means mind, and Shin means as it is, as one wants. Norbo is jewel. So the jewel that satisfies desires. This is a term that, in this context, is something something that satisfies our mundane desires. If we were able somehow to obtain and choose, there's a suffering sentient beings there, and here is the 2 billion euros. What would we choose? I mean, are we going to think twice about it? Obviously, the being that's suffering, or not. Unfortunately, I don't think so. But what is it that we want? Do we want, I mean, deeply, at the end of the day, do we want this illusion of the happiness that comes through an external material situation, or do we want to reach a state of peace that goes beyond all permeating suffering, and have our qualities fully realized and reach a state of peace and balance. And somebody say, "Oh, I'd like to have both." But when you say both, it means that you don't trust the spiritual part. But this is a fundamental question at the beginning. So the verse says, "May I, dak." Dak means a dakni. So on my side, so to all limited beings, sem chen. Sem is mind, and chen means that possess. So then tamche is all, and la. And so to all of those who possess a mind, so to all sentient beings, because there are also beings that are not sentient, like rocks and plants. They're non-sentient beings. So sentient beings are beings that have a mind. So may I, towards all sentient beings, may I, towards all limited beings who are more precious than a wish-granting gem. For what? More what? Yishi norbu, this wish-granting gem. Leklakpa means beyond, more, far superior. They're far superior to a wish-granting gem. Far superior to what? For our final objective. Dun chuk. Dun means objective. Chuk means excellent. So the excellent objective, nirvana. Drupa is realize. So sentient beings are far superior to a wish-granting gem in helping us reach our final aim, the supreme aim. Because to reach the supreme aim, do I need a lot of money or do I need a lot of love? I need a lot of love. So how do we develop love? By being closed up with ourselves, or allowing ourselves to see others. The other allows us to come into contact with the most precious and beautiful part of ourselves. Something that all the billions in the world would not permit. With all the billions in the world, and I can imagine many beautiful things to do, but the billions are not going to help me develop states of well-being that I can take with me after my death. And love instead, yes. So the other beings, if we have in front of us as an objective to reach the supreme state, the so-called nirvana, to reach a deep state of peace, as we said this morning, if this is for us a real objective, let's remember that every being, not all in a generalized way, no, each one is worth more in relation to reaching this aim, and they are far superior to any wish-granting gem or billions or houses or whatever it is. And in our life, on the other side, if we were to choose between taking care of a sentient being or receiving a great material benefit, we would go towards the material wealth, because we believe in this materialistic utopia, this illusion of being fulfilled by material things. But to reach the supreme aim, there is nothing better than there's nothing better than sentient beings that allow me to practice patience and generosity and develop love. And so with this awareness, with the thought, the feeling of wanting to reach this final state, this supreme aim of nirvana, of enlightenment. And let's remember that for enlightenment, every limited being is worth more than any wish-granting gem. And so with this awareness, may I taktu chepar simparsho. Chepar means may I grasp on to others. May I want them to be happy. May I see the others. May I love the others. Daktu chepar zimpar. Rang chen sin is a way to say selfish. Rang is self. Che is important. More or less like, and zin is to grasp. So I grasp at my own importance. And altruism, which would be che par zin. So I'm grasping at the importance of others. May I always see the other, see the importance of others, take care of each and every one, given that they are more important to me than a wish-granting gem, given that I want to actualize the supreme aim of nirvana. Is this clear? Why? Why do we have this verse? Because it doesn't come spontaneously, this thought. If this came to us spontaneously, then we wouldn't need to be reminded of it. Let's remember, these are not verses to study. These are verses to help us generate conscientiousness, train our mind in what we know, but that doesn't come spontaneously to us. So when we see any being, a person, an animal, any sentient being, it's the other that allows us to come into contact with the most precious aspect of ourselves. Sometimes I've told the story of the story of this experience I had with this stink bug here here in Albagnano, like in the middle of autumn, at the beginning of winter. There are many stink bugs. Has like six little legs. It kind of flies, but doesn't know how to land at all. It's quite coordinated in flying, but doesn't know how to land. And then some have they defend themselves with their stink, but the only real damage they do is that at home they make this like little orange brown poop, that can be against the wall or in the drapes. But at my house, I'm just full. This year, fewer, but last year there were many more. So I had like 30 or 40 at home, and then you take them one by one, gently, and then I take them outside, and then I said, no, this is just a sanctuary for the stink bugs. Let's just relax. So this was last year. I was taking a shower. Oh, maybe it was 2 years ago. Anyway, at a certain point after the shower, there was this little stink bug, and I moved it, and then I looked at it, and I was drinking water. And for a minute, and I don't know why, it was drinking water, and I don't know why, but in that moment, I allowed myself, I allowed myself to look, really to see this little being, not in a conceptual way, but this little being that, thank you. I saw this little being that had its needs, and was there drinking water, and naturally I saw and I allowed myself just to see that being, and I felt deep, deep love. That joy that brought to me was so much more than many, many other happy moments, and it was great love. Me and the stink bug, and that little being, that little insect that we could even call insignificant. Instead, it allowed me to come into contact with the most beautiful part of myself by generating a state of well-being and happiness that we feel when we allow ourselves to see the other, and when we allow ourselves to love purely without expectations, like I give you this to get this back, etc., etc. This takes us to a state of joy and well-being that is incomparable. So the other allows us to see better ourselves. The other allows us to cultivate and develop our own qualities. It's said when Buddhist philosophy is studied, like in debate, for example, at a certain point it's explained very, very well, the importance of the Buddhas and the gurus. It's said that the importance of the Buddha and the importance of the gurus is as important as the importance of the sentient beings. If we were to compare how much gratitude I should have towards the guru and towards the gratitude I should have towards the Buddhas and the gurus, those who guide me, and the gratitude I should have towards limited beings, the sentient beings, should be the same. It's impossible to grow without them. And in the monastery, the hours and hours are spent debating about this. And they say, if sentient beings are so important to if they're so important to the development of each one, then what will happen when there are no more limited beings, when they've all reached enlightenment? And then I think that if that should happen, surely a Buddha would show himself as a sentient being to help the very last one. But many of you, for example, know the story of a Sangha. I'm going to repeat it anyway, even if many of you know it. Sangha is represented behind me. There's this kind of blue window here. Above, to my right, near the last one, near Lama Tsongkhapa, with a red hat and a kind of vase and cushion. That's a Sangha represented. And on the other extremity, there's Nagarjuna. There's a Sangha, Maitreya. There's a Sangha, Maitreya, Vajradhara, Manjushri. They're here because they were among the most important masters. We have two lineages called the profound lineage, where the correct view of the correct view of reality is emphasized, and then the other is the extended path, comes from a Sangha, where the part of bodhichitta is emphasized. So a Sangha, it said that he had finished all his studies and studies of philosophy. He came from one of the most important monastic institutions called the Monastery of Nalanda, and he it's said that it was one of the most important institutes of study in the whole world. Nalanda was built about 300 years after Buddha's death. Asanga was not only a great practitioner and had great qualities, many disciples. He was very prepared within Buddhism, but at a certain point he realized that he knew a lot, but the sincere, deep feeling of love towards others, the real bodhichitta, was lacking in him. So he says, so he went on retreat of Buddha Maitreya. Maitreya is the embodiment of love. So he left on retreat to realize this great love. So he left his disciples temporarily. He went into a cave in the mountains to do a solitary retreat and meditated for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, he looked at himself and said, nothing has changed. I don't feel different. I haven't had any kind of particular realization or great benefit of being here. It'd be better to go back, because at least if I go back to the village and the monastery, at least I can help them. And so he starts going down the mountain. And as he's going down, he meets a lady, an old lady. And she had with her a container full of needles, and in the other container that had these little rods of metal. And then she had a little piece of cotton with her, a little piece of cotton that she was just rubbing against these little iron rods. He said, lady, what are you doing? And she answered, I'm rubbing the iron to make needles. He said, what perseverance you have. If this lady can spend years of her life making up needles by rubbing cotton against little iron rods, and what's 3 years of my life to realize great love? It's nothing. So he turns around and goes back to the cave. 3 more years go by. No result. He says, oh, it's 6 years now. I better go back. And as he's going down, he sees another phenomenon. In this case, he sees there's a drop of water that's dropping onto this, where the water is dripping on the stone. It had totally consumed and used up the stone. He said, amazing, if something as light as a drop of water can make an enormous hole in a rock, with such constancy. So what is 6 years of my life to develop the great love towards all beings? So it goes back to the cave. Another 3 years go by. Now we're up to 9 years with no result. And Atisha says, oh, now I'm really leaving. Starts to go down. And then he sees something else. He realized, he saw that there was a big wall of stone, and there were some bird nests. And to get to the nest, to get in and out, they, with the very tip of their feathers, they actually made a mark into the stone. And he said, if something so soft like the tip of a feather can use up and make a big mark in a wall of stone, so what really the 3 years or 4 more years to develop the great love is nothing. So he goes back to the cave, and 3 more years go by, and now 12 years have gone by. But after 12 years, there's nothing here for me to do. I've been here for 12 years doing everything I should have done. I've had no result, so I don't feel anything particular. I've no vision, no mystical vision. No, I'm going back. At this point, he goes down the mountain. He gets to the first village, and the first being that he meets is a dog. It's a dog who's quite old and was wounded, had a big open wound. And in this wound, the wound was full of worms. And the worms were eating him from the inside out. And when he sees this dog, a Sangha doesn't think twice about it. Spontaneously, he feels a deep love for the dog, compassion. He sees the dog and he really strongly wants the dog to be free from any form of suffering, from the pain that he has, towards the deeper suffering of samsara. And he sees all levels of suffering in the dog, and he wants to do anything he can to help the dog. And at that point, he needs to take the worms away. But when he gets close to the worms, he sees the worms, and he realizes that the worms suffer too, and has the same love for the worms as he does for the dog, and he doesn't want to hurt the worms. He wants the worms to be free of suffering, free of suffering at the moment, and also on a deeper level. So he had a problem. How could he take away the worms? Because he would hurt them if he took them out, because they wouldn't have a place to be. But then he thought, if he doesn't take them away, then the dog is not well. So he said his solution was to cut off a piece of his own flesh, and so he takes a knife, and he takes a piece of flesh from his thigh, and then he goes to take out the worms. So he thought, well, if I take the worms with my hands that are so dry and rough, I'm going to hurt them. So I need to take them with my tongue. And I'm going to add this. It's not in the story, but I think that with all the compassion that he had, the story says that Asanga closed his eyes. That shows also the conditionings that remain. That with all the compassion of the world, the conditioning of doing something that could be like nauseating, made him close his eyes. So he closed his eyes. He goes towards the dog to take the worms out with his tongue, and he never gets to the dog, and he falls to the ground, and he gets up, he opens his eyes, and he can't find the dog, and he looks in front, and there's Buddha Maitreya. And he says to Buddha Maitreya, well, where have you been? I've been meditating on you for 12 years. And now that I've left my cave, you've come. And Buddha Maitreya said, I was always there with you. In every moment, I was always accompanying you, but you couldn't see me. But the first question actually was to Maitreya is, where's the dog? That was actually the first question that he asked Buddha Maitreya, where's the dog? And Buddha Maitreya said, I was the dog. He says, well then, why'd you come now and not before? And he answered, I was always with you, but you couldn't see me. And at that point, the story says that he took Buddha Maitreya on his shoulders, and with respect, he takes him through the village so that everyone could see him, but nobody could. Then the story goes on, but here we're going to stop. We're going to stop here. What happens is that, let's try to look at this story through its own symbolism. A Sangha wants to meditate. He wants to familiarize himself to realize Buddha Maitreya. Buddha Maitreya is the embodiment of love. So to develop great love towards others. After 12 years, 12 years visualizing and trying mentally to trying to familiarize himself with a feeling of love towards everyone. But he was able to actualize this love when he was in front of a being. In that case, it was a dog and those worms. And it's through those beings that a Sangha was able to realize, actualize, what he had prepared himself for in 12 years and also, before. So the beings around us are extremely important for our own path. Without them, we cannot develop love and compassion, generosity. We can't develop our qualities. We can't even practice patience. And an important quality for ourselves. Someone would say, well, if there wasn't anyone to bother me, then I wouldn't need to practice patience. Instead, no. So may I see every being as something incredibly precious and worthy for me. Let's remember that beings, it doesn't need to be the generalized beings. It's all and each one. So we start practicing this with those who are the closest to us. There are the 5 categories of beings that one should start practicing with. In the 7-point mind training, these 5 categories are classified. So when I'm in front of another being, may I see that being as being more precious to me than a wish-granting gem to obtain the result, the ultimate result, to reach nirvana, develop my qualities. May I love him and take care of this being. And if someone gave me a possibility, if someone left us, let's say at some point someone comes and someone gives us a suitcase full of money, are you just going to leave it there? Or you take it, you wrap it up and you don't let it go. So it's something precious and you don't want to lose it. You're careful, you take care of it. If I'm in front of a being, if I allow myself through that being, I can grow. I can reach what I want more than anything, but it depends not just on me. I can only obtain that through the contact with others. So who are these other beings? Instead of saying, may all beings, there are family members. So now Christmas is coming, it's a good opportunity. We have those that we live with daily around. We have our friends. These are the 3 categories of, let's say, of more attraction or neutral feelings. Our friends, our family, the people we work with, maybe, all of the people that we encounter daily, people that we interact with in our daily lives at work, or then we also have the people that we have helped and in return they have harmed us. Maybe people we have trusted and today we have some kind of conflict with, ex-friends, spouses, people that we've trusted and given love to, and then we've found ourselves in conflict with. And then there are those we have karmic aversion to. So those who we dislike without reason. I mean, it can happen. I don't know if it's ever happened to you to be in front of someone where you feel like you don't have any reason at all, but you just don't like that person. My master Ken Lakpala said, he tells this story that when he was at the Serame monastery in Tibet, at a certain point there was another monk who was there, and every time he would see him, there's some kind of aversion would come to him. And he didn't even know his name. I mean, there were like 4,000, more than 4,000 monks there. There were so many of them. But every time he would see him, some kind of aversion would come to him. But then he just, let it go by. Like 30 years later in India, he found himself in front of this monk, but he didn't have that feeling anymore with him. And talking to him, he said, what's really strange? For many years, I would see you, and then I would feel a lot of aversion. I don't even know why. And then the other monk said, me too. So these are called karmic aversions. For some cause in the past that we don't know, we have a kind of aversion towards someone, without a concrete reason. So the 5 categories: family, friends, acquaintances, at work, etc. People who were close to us, but then for some reason have become enemies, let's say, and then those to whom we have aversion without any concrete reason. These are the 5 categories where we should start practicing with these 5 categories. Not the compassion for the child, who is in a war-torn country, which is wonderful too. But we need to, if we want to seriously practice, we need to start here with these 5 categories. So in this first verse, what's the training? Then, when I find myself in front of someone, to see that person as being precious to me, and take care. It's precious to me, not because I like him, not because he helps me with my mundane objectives, but because through that being, I can come into contact with my most important qualities. I can develop the most beautiful part of myself, and I can go towards the state of nirvana that I am seeking. Is that clear? Theoretically, it's not difficult. It's not complicated as a concept. Is it easy to actualize? No, that's why it was secret. Because these are simple things. It was secret because either one has a deep commitment to say, I'm going to put this into practice, even if it's tiresome. Because, to putting into practice the 8 verses is like taking the bull by the horns and then really looking at oneself in the eyes and say, okay, you have nowhere to run. I'm going to get you. Selfishness. And the more we go on, the more difficult it becomes a lot with this text. But let's start with this concept, to seeing others and feeling gratitude towards them, seeing that they're important to us, that we can't exist independently from other beings, and we can't evolve as beings without others. And we're not going to, we don't evolve, just because if we can't evolve if if everyone is kind and good to us and benefits us. No, what we want is to overcome this obsession to our own self-gratification. So I need to make that first effort, which is giving value to others, not what the other is for me and my mundane objectives, but to give value, but the value that he adds to my spiritual objectives. and to see that the other is important to me. Let's start from this first point. I depend on others. And others means everyone, each and every one. Because Sangha actualized his potential of love, the great love, this unconditional love, when he was able to love one being, that dog. He was able to love him unconditionally. Because we have two types of love: ordinary love that's conditioned, and the great love which is unconditional. What conditions love? Selfishness. Conditioned love means I love you as long as you do what I want, do what I want the way I think it should be, and you're helpful to me. So my love is conditioned by my own selfishness. When I love you independently from what you are or not, or you not are, or what you do or you don't do, I love you because you exist. That's it. That's unconditional love. There aren't conditions for loving you. Often we love as if we were doing business. A principle, what's the basis of business? We give so that we can receive. I give you this and you give me that. Do we agree? Yes. Then we exchange. As long as I'm giving what I think I should give and you're giving me what I think you should be giving me, everything's fine. When does a business not go well? When I give you what I think I give you what I think I should give you, and you don't give me back what I think you should give me, then it's not working anymore. If I love you deeply as long as you correspond to my expectations and you do what I want you to do and you do what I want to have. As soon as you don't do what I think you should do, with everything I do for you, and look at what you do for me, it's the business isn't working anymore. I don't love you anymore. I'm not going to do my part because you're not doing yours. This is an ordinary way of loving, a selfish way of loving. What we're talking about is something that transcends this. It's our ability to see others independently of what the person is or isn't for the I and the my. Where your happiness is simply important for me. That's it. I want you to be happy. I want you to be well. I don't know necessarily who you are, what you've done, or what you haven't done. Even if I know, it's not important. Your happiness is important to me. And when we're able to love a person, a being, an animal, a being unconditionally, that opens the door to loving anyone else. That's why we talk about unlimited love. Is it difficult? Yes. If it were easy, we would already all be Buddhas. Why is it difficult? Because is it painful to feel that love? No, it's marvelous. So why is it difficult? Why should it be difficult to love others? What's keeping us from loving others? What does it cost us? Why is it so difficult? Because we are deeply used to and conditioned by our selfishness. Even if opening up our hearts and loving others is more beneficial to us, it's difficult because we're conditioned. So the process of training, of swimming against the tide of the current, is not necessarily pleasurable. It's not easy, not necessarily easy or pleasurable, or where we need to constantly act in ways that don't come to us spontaneously. And when, let's talk about people. When we see another person around us, someone in front of us, our tendency is to divide him into one of the categories. Just one, without giving names, one of the categories. And then we naturally act with attraction, aversion, or indifference. This attraction, aversion, indifference is always in relation to the I and the my. The effort that we need to make here is to manage to go beyond and allow ourselves to see the other. But in this first verse, we're in a pre in an initial step where we recognize what our objective is and recognize how important others are to us. What do I want? Do I want a comfortable samsara, or do I want nirvana? If I want a comfortable samsara, then I'm going to choose the 2 billion. I'm going to choose to work like a crazy person, to always be able to buy more and more, and I live in this game of consuming and producing, and then one day this life is over. On the other hand, the other choice is, no, I don't want that. I want nirvana. I want to overcome my own limits. I want to develop my own qualities and reach a permanent state of peace. And I want more than anything to help everyone do the same. If this is really our objective, not just on a conceptual level because, I'm Buddhist and so I should want nirvana. No, but in a deep level, beyond, the word nirvana aside, this state of peace that doesn't depend on external condition. At that point, if that's what I want, what allows me to reach that state of peace is love and wisdom. What keeps me from reaching that state of peace? Selfishness, anger, hate, etc. And the one who allows me to develop my qualities? Others. It's through other beings around me that I can practice generosity and accumulate merit. It's through them that I can practice patience. It's through them that I can practice my own morality or cultivate love, gratitude, respect, and all the rest. So the other, understood as anyone and everyone and each one, is extremely important for us. So I've seen many times, I'll try to say it in a nice way, I've seen an attitude of great respect and gratitude and towards one's own guru and non-respect for others. Like, my guru is there in front of me, and to help him, even if I need to like trample the beings in front of me, I'll do it. But are the beings the beings are as important as our incredibly special gurus and the Buddhas. And realizing that is part of our path, that it's part, understanding that is part of developing the bodhichitta. So in our daily lives, the first training needs to be this, when we're in contact with others, we should recognize that they are as important to our freedom from samsara as our gurus, as our masters, our teachers, and the deeply loved people in our lives. They're incredibly important and more precious than anything that we could get materially, and they're far superior to any wish granting gem. This is a strong because, as we said before, if I should choose between a being or a couple billions of euros, where does our mind go? Maybe the mind says, oh well, if I had a couple billions of euros, then I could really help the being. But let's go back to what we said before. What's my objective? What is it that I really want? And always come back to the point that by putting ourselves at the service of others, we reach our aim. And this first verse is on the level. This shows us it shows us that we are still selfish, because others are important to my nirvana. I need to take care of others because they're important to me. But we're not going to be able to love others if we don't come close to them. What's one of the first steps in loving someone else or feeling love for someone else is getting close. Maybe we suffer from the same problem, or we want the same thing, but if someone helps me, naturally I feel a kind of attraction towards that person, don't I? And when I see that person, that being who's in front of me is more important to my final objective than all the money in the world that I could have, naturally I'll create this closeness with them, the basis for being able to love them. So we're not indifferent to anyone, and there's no one who's not important to us. We need to be careful to not fall into the trap of saying, may all beings have the happiness and its causes, with the exception of those 5 over there, may all beings accept these. No, one generates a kind of generalized love because I'm Buddhist and I'm supposed to love everyone, as that's what they've told me. I'm not attracted to other people's happiness, but I'm attracted to this idea that I'm helping them. We need to be attracted to the happiness. We need to be attracted to other people's happiness, not to the idea of being the one who loves. So all means each one. Our family members, those with whom we have difficulty, the ones we find difficult, this and that. And the verses that follow take us to other very practical daily aspects. If we find ourselves in front of someone for whom we have aversion, or whatever it is, it's one of the clearest mirrors that we can have to show us our own aversions and our own states. No matter, we need to see the mirror for our own selfishness. So we need to be able to see our selfishness to be able to face it. And when we're in front of others, I don't know if it's ever happened. You'll just say, like, if you've heard someone say, or if you've wanted to say, you you bring out the worst in me. I didn't know that I had this inside me. Well, thank you. Thank you that you showed this to me, that you showed, because if you brought this out in me, it means that it was there. So it's good that I can see it, so I can face it. And we're going to see all this tomorrow. Let's stay here on this first step. So let's try let's look at this translation of the verse. Yes, a question about the Italian translation, to do something that is here in English. We have cherish and there's a question about the Italian translation. A difficulty that I have when there's a translation of verses is the translation. The Tibetan language follows a different order. You know, the verb is different. But I'm going to try to translate with the order of Tibetan grammar. Hopefully, the meaning will be clearer, even if the grammar isn't. From my side towards all sentient beings, from my side towards all sentient beings, more precious than a wish-granting gem, more precious than a wish-granting gem for actualizing the final aim. With this awareness, may I always love every being in every moment. Taktu Chepar Ziparsho. Let me take a dictionary and see. So here, I'm just going to look in the dictionary just to take away my doubt. The difficulty with Tibetan, and you see that when someone's starting to translate, because when someone starts translating, it's at the beginning, when you can see that the translator takes the first words in the dictionary, but what happens at one word in Tibetan, maybe there are 25 different translations depending on the context, etc. So, Chepa, Taktu Chepar Ziparsho. Chepar means beloved, dear, treasured, precious, important, essential, crucial, valuable, diligent. In other words, it means to love, to Chepar as a verb, to want the well-being of. It's that same feeling that we have towards ourself, with selfishness, this obsession with self-gratification, but it's towards other beings. So from my side, towards anyone, towards all beings, since they are more precious to me to actualize my final objective than any wish-granting gem, may I, with this awareness, love each and every one in every moment. May I hold on. It's not just love, it's cherish. To cherish, to keep to keep close to our heart. If if I'm very thirsty, and if I'm very thirsty and I have water, I don't love water. I have a kind of attachment to the water. I see water as being precious to me, and I cherish it. This is that same word in Tibetan. So just as I cherish water because it keeps me from feeling thirsty, I cherish any and all beings that I meet because they are more important to me than they're more important to me for actualizing the supreme aim than any wish granting gem. So the training here is may may I see every being as being precious. May I see every being as being more precious than any wish granting gem. In other words, may I see every being, may I recognize how important they are. In other words, I need to train in not being indifferent to others. In another text that talks about the 51 mental factors, there's a mental factor called non-aggression. And this mental factor, one description is given, is like, sorry, it's non-violence is the correct translation. The non-violence is translated as the non-indifference towards the suffering of others. Because often we think that we're good because we don't go against anyone, but we're indifference to them. And that indifference is also a form of violence. So the first training is non-indifference to the presence of others. Recognize that everyone is important to me, and also train in my objective. What is it that I want? What do I want it in this life and in future lives? Is that clear? It's not an easy training, but it's not difficult to understand. It's something difficult because it goes against two deep habits that we have. This training it opposes the materialistic utopia and our own selfishness. And so we need time and practice, but let's try to remember it constantly. Tomorrow we'll go to the second verse in the morning, and then we'll see verse after verse. I'd like you, there's no hurry in reading it all. Try to read it with attention. Maybe write my own version of the translation. I'm sorry that you don't understand Tibetan. And I see that, my translation isn't great, but try to get close to it, see it as a training, and nobody has the obligation to already be there. One thing is our objective. This is training. Okay. Asanga after having spent his whole life studying and training, he spent 12 years in a cave meditating. And then maybe someone said, well, then why should I even start? I start because I want to get there. Because Asanga did it in a cave in one, different context, but we can all do it depending on adapting to the context in which we are, and there is no context that is not favorable to the training. It's not an external training; it's inner. These are inner inner attitude towards others that naturally will bring external changes, but it's our way of thinking of others. This is an inner attitude. It's time to make our dedications. We're just gonna recite this first part of the verse. From my side towards everyone who are more precious than a wish-granting gem to obtain the excellent objective with this awareness. May I cherish each and every one in every moment.
Losan tempe drume sasum ki drove munsila takto ne gyurchi kewa kunto yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sada lamge yunte rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyurtobe shu Nimo dele tsendele, nime kunyan delekshin, ninsen takto delekpe, kuncho sumke chingelo, kuncho sumke ngodrubotsol, kuncho sumke trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our life with various signs of auspiciousness. Repeat after me.
Sem chosudro, che lam tudro, lam la parche, mi omarsho.
May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path be free from interferences. Trashidele. Thank you, everyone. We'll continue tomorrow morning.